The WZO is the World Zionist Organization.
The WZO can influence reform, liberal Judaism in Israel, and we can make a stronger impact in Israel through the shared values that we have with all our brothers and sisters in the liberal movement all over the world.
The Israel Movement for Progressive and Reform Judaism is the umbrella organization, the Israeli umbrella organization of all the reform congregations and institutions in Israel.
Now, IMPJ itself cannot be a political arm. It's not involved in politics by law, but it is involved in the grand framework of the political works of the reform movement, and that is done through Arzenu.
For us, on the reform side, we have ARTSA in the US. Most of the countries around the world that we have representations will have either ARTSA or Arzenu within that country. The umbrella organization of all the different ARTSAs or country Arzenus is called Arzenu. Arzenu is the political arm of the reform movement, the umbrella organization.
On the simplest level, Arzenu is one of the political parties that make up the WZO. The WZO has three constituent groups within it. One are the apolitical Jewish organizations that define themselves as Zionist. So those are the World Union for Progressive Judaism, it's the women's organizations Ritzo Hadassah, the World Union of Jewish Students, global Jewish organizations that it was felt should be represented around the political table, but that are not political in and of itself, and therefore they just get represented. Then there's representation for the citizens of the State of Israel through the Israeli political parties. Again, those parties who define themselves as Zionists will receive a share of the pie of representation simply based on the outcome of the Knesset election. And then finally, and this is where Arzenu fits in, there are the international political organizations. It's very easy to set up an international political organization. You have to have some sort of platform that agrees with the central document of the World Zionist Organization, which is the Jerusalem Platform. And then you have to have constituents in 5 countries around the world. And Arzenu is one of those organizations. Our platform is that we bring Reform, Progressive and Liberal Jews to Zionism. And we're represented in 14 countries around the world. So within the structure of the World Zionist Organization, we are one of the political players. What does that mean specifically? It means that we get to sit at the table. You have to kind of imagine it as if, you're voting in your local elections, local national elections, and you're voting in people to represent you for the next 4 or 5 years. And then they, amongst them, depending on the power balance between the parties, a cabinet is decided and ministerial posts are decided.
The WZO has the board of directors, which is called the Hanhala. So when you hear someone say the Hanhala decided this, the Hanhala is the board of directors of the WZO. WZO actually owns 50% of the Jewish Agency, which will also be heard as JAFI. The Jewish Agency for Israel is the Zionist organization that was formed by the WZO. At some point, 50% of this organization was moved, or the ownership of, was given to the JFNA, which is the Jewish Federations of North America, and also to Keren HaYesod, another acronym, which means an organization that's owned by the Zionist movement, which is the fundraiser of the Zionist movement. That's called Keren HaYesod. You'll hear about them, KH or Keren HaYesod, around the world. There's also JNF Kakal. Kakal is the landowner that the small blue boxes that are also called in Yiddish pushkas, where people push in their 10 cents. I would still do that as a young elementary school student. Every Friday last lesson of the week, the box would go around, everyone would put their few agorot then into these boxes, and through the money that was raised by Keren Kayemet, land was purchased for Jewish settlement of the state of Israel. So now these lands are now actually bringing in money, in spite of the fact that we are also purchasing land, but we try to make sure that these purchases, and again, this is why our strength is important, that the land that is purchased is in areas that we, as reforms and our values, allow us to believe that these are widely consensus within the Jewish people, and not areas where we are less happy with that land is being purchased with. So Kakal in Israel, in the countries outside of Israel, is called JNF, Jewish National Fund. These are organizations that are local organizations which are connected to the Israeli institution that's called Kakal, but they're autonomous. That's JNF US and JNF UK, which we don't have influence on from the Zionist movement. We do have influence on our own institution, which is called Kakal, and has 17% of the ownership of the land of Israel.
I mean, for me, the biggest thing about the alphabet soup is that once you learn all the terms, you realize that nobody at home knows what the terms are about. So, like, I say kakal, and everybody in Israel knows what you mean. And even if you say KKL, most people don't really know what you mean. It's all a bit confusing. And I think one of the things is there's this whole hidden world of institutions that until you get involved in Arzenu, you have no idea how much power they have. And for me, it was more like an introduction to alphabet soup, which is like, this is like opening the door on a secret world, but it shouldn't really be a secret because it has enormous power.